There is something that most messages like this one will never say out loud, and I want to say it to you right now before anything else. Most of the time, when someone sits down to speak into a chosen one's life, they rush straight to the blessing. They skip past the part where you found out who was really talking about you behind closed doors. They skip the part where you sat quietly and smiled at someone who had been digging into your reputation, your character, your name, while looking you directly in the face. They skip that part because it is uncomfortable, but I am not going to skip it. Because you did not come here for another comfortable message. You came here because something in your spirit already knew, and you needed someone to finally say it plainly. Two people were digging on you. Maybe you already know their names. Maybe you have a feeling, but you have not let yourself fully believe it yet, because believing it would mean accepting that someone you trusted, someone you were kind to, someone you prayed for or showed up for, was quietly working against you. That kind of truth does not go down easy. It sits in your chest. It makes you second-guess your own discernment. It makes you wonder if you were too open, too trusting, too slow to see what was happening right in front of you. And I want to tell you something that most voice in this space will not admit. Feeling that sting does not mean you are weak. It means you are human, and it means you are awake. Beloved and chosen one, you were never paranoid, you were perceptive. There is a significant difference between those two things, and heaven wants you to understand that difference today. Paranoia invents threats. Perception recognizes them. What you have been sensing, that quiet unease, that slight pulling back you felt in certain rooms, that moment when someone's energy shifted when your name was mentioned, that was not anxiety. That was your spirit doing exactly what it was designed to do. You are a chosen one, and chosen ones carry a frequency that unsettles the wrong people. Not because you did anything wrong, but because your very presence reminds certain people of what they have not yet become. Now here is what I want you to understand about the season you are stepping out of. The people who were digging on you did not do it because you were nothing. People do not spend energy tearing down what does not threaten them. You do not dig at dirt. You dig at gold. And the fact that someone thought you were worth the effort of whispering about, worth the effort of undermining, worth the effort of planting doubt around, is evidence of something they saw in you that you may have not yet fully seen in yourself. Heaven allowed you to hear this message today because the season of them operating in the dark is finished, and the season of your visibility is beginning. There are specific signs that chosen ones experience in the period just before a major shift. And I want you to listen carefully because you are going to recognize yourself in these words. The first sign is this: you have been experiencing a kind of clarity that almost frightens you. You have been seeing people more accurately, seeing situations more accurately, and instead of feeling excited about that clarity, it has made you feel a little bit lonely. Because clarity sometimes means recognizing that not everyone around you belongs in the next chapter of your life. The second sign is that your sleep has been unusual. Either you have been sleeping very deeply and waking up with a sense of something new pressing on your chest, or you have not been sleeping well at all because your mind keeps returning to certain conversations, certain moments, certain faces. Both of these are signals. Both of them mean your spirit is actively processing a transition. The third sign is that you have been feeling a pull away from things and people that used to feel comfortable. Not because you are being antisocial or dramatic, but because your spirit already knows that what is coming requires a different kind of environment than where you have been. And the fourth sign, chosen one, is this: somewhere in the last several weeks or months, You have had a moment, maybe just a brief moment, where you thought about walking away from everything, from the dream, from the faith, from the waiting. You had a moment where you thought perhaps you had been mistaken about who you were and what you were called to do. And I need you to know that that moment was not a sign that you were losing your faith. It was a sign that you were at the edge of your breakthrough, because the enemy always pushes hardest right before the door opens. You are not here by accident today. Heaven did not just send this message into your algorithm randomly. There is a reason this found you at this particular moment in your life. You are an earth angel, beloved. You are part of a divine plan that was written before you were born, before the people who tried to bury you were born, before the situation that made you feel small even existed. Heaven has paused everything around you right now to make sure this message lands in the right place inside of you, not in your mind, in your spirit, because your spirit already knows what your mind is still catching up to. You are a chosen one, and that is not a title you earned by being perfect. It is a reality you were assigned before you even had the language to describe it. It is why certain things have never quite fit. It is why certain rooms have never quite felt like yours. It is why certain relationships have always carried a subtle weight that you could not explain. And it is why two people thought they could dim your light by digging on you in the dark. They were wrong, and heaven has warned them now. Not for the first time, for the final time. That word final is important because it means the chapter is closing, not on you, on them. And a new chapter, one that belongs entirely to you and to the assignment on your life, is beginning. You were not almost ready. You were ready the moment you showed up here. There is a particular kind of pain that comes with being in a season of waiting. And it is not the kind of pain that makes a sound. It is the quiet kind. The kind that sits with you in the morning before you have fully opened your eyes, when, for just a half a second, everything feels normal, and then the weight settles back in, and you remember exactly where you are and exactly what has not yet changed. Nobody talks about that half a second. Nobody talks about the specific texture of waking up inside a season that feels too long. But I am going to talk about it right now, because you need someone to name what you have been carrying before you can fully put it down. You have been in a season of waiting, and I do not mean waiting in the easy sense, the kind where you are mildly inconvenienced and slightly impatient. I mean the deep kind of waiting, the kind where you have done everything right, prayed everything right, believed everything you were supposed to believe, shown up when you did not feel like showing up, let go of what you were told to let go of, and still, the thing you are waiting for has not appeared. That kind of waiting has a specific weight to it. And if you have been inside it for any real amount of time, you know exactly what I mean. So before we go any further, I want to name 4 things that people in this exact season recognize. And I want you to pay attention as I say them, because these are not generalizations. These are specific. If you recognize yourself in these words, it is because this message was designed to find you. The first one is this. Somewhere in the recent past, a wave of sadness came over you that was not connected to anything that happened that day. It was not triggered by a specific event or a specific person. It just arrived, like a tide coming in. And it brought with it images and memories from your past, things you thought you had made peace with, relationships that ended, dreams that did not unfold the way you planned, moments where you gave everything you had and still walked away with less than you deserved. That wave of sadness was not depression. It was not weakness. It was your spirit doing an inventory. It was heaven preparing you to release what you no longer need to carry into the next season of your life. The grief you felt was real, but it was not a sign that your story is over. It was a sign that a chapter is closing. The second sign is this: familiar places and familiar people have started to feel heavy in a way you cannot explain. A friendship that used to feel easy now feels like effort. A place you used to love going to now feels strange. Like the air in that room belongs to a version of you that no longer quite fits who you are becoming. You have sat in conversations that used to energize you and felt yourself drifting, not because you are becoming cold or disconnected, but because your spirit is already oriented towards something new. When familiar things begin to feel foreign, it does not mean something is wrong with you. It means you are growing faster than your current environment can contain. You have not become difficult. You have become different, and different, in the language of heaven, is called chosen. The third sign is one that many people are afraid to admit because it sounds too specific to be common, but it is far more common than you know. You have been having a recurring experience, whether in a dream or in a waking moment of quiet, where you see yourself standing in front of a door that has not yet opened. Sometimes in the dream you knock and nothing happens. Sometimes you are just standing there, looking at the door, knowing that something is on the other side, but not yet being able to see what it is. That image of the unopened door is not a symbol of failure. It is a symbol of positioning. You are not locked out. You are positioned outside a door that is about to open from the inside. The difference between those two things is everything. The fourth sign is this: the same message keeps finding you from different directions. You will hear a word in a song, and then see a phrase in something you read, and then someone will say something to you in passing that echoes the exact same idea. And it will happen too many times in too short a period for it to feel like coincidence. Heaven speaks in patterns. When the same message arrives through multiple channels, it is not random. It is a confirmation. It is God making sure that what you need to hear is loud enough to reach you even through the noise of everyday life. And the fact that this message found you today, after all of those other pieces have been arriving, means that this is the moment the pattern was building toward. Now I want to speak to some of the specific pains that come with this season, because naming pain is the first step toward releasing it. Some of you have not been sleeping well, not because anything is physically wrong, but because your mind will not quiet itself at night. You replay conversations. You review decisions. You wonder if you made the wrong choice somewhere, if you took the wrong turn, if the delay you are experiencing is the consequence of something you did or did not do. And in the dark, with no one around to anchor you, those thoughts can grow very loud. I want to say to you plainly, the insomnia of the chosen one in a season of transition is not punishment. It is preparation. Your spirit is actively working even when your body needs to rest. Some of you have been experiencing a loneliness that is difficult to describe because you are not technically alone. You have people in your life. You have people who love you. But there is a specific type of loneliness that comes from being in a place in your journey that no one around you has been. When you are standing at the edge of something new and the people closest to you are still standing in the middle of something old, the distance between you is not geographic, it is spiritual. And that distance can feel like the loneliest place in the world. You are not alone, beloved. You are just ahead. Some of you have been carrying the pain of feeling wronged, and not just wronged by strangers, but wronged by people who knew you. People who saw you give, who watched you stay loyal, who benefited from your generosity, and who still turned around and spoke poorly of you or worked quietly against your progress. That pain is one of the most specific and sharp pains a chosen one can carry. because it is not just the wound of being hurt. It is the wound of being misunderstood by someone who had every reason to understand you correctly. And some of you have been carrying the weight of feeling unseen. You have done good work, quiet work, faithful work, work that required sacrifice and consistency, and showing up even when you were exhausted. And you have watched other people receive recognition for things that required far less. And you have had to make a quiet internal decision not to become bitter about it. That decision costs something, and I want to acknowledge the cost of that today. Staying gracious when you feel overlooked is one of the most spiritually expensive things a person can do. And the fact that you are still here, still showing up, still choosing grace, says something about the depth of what God placed inside of you. Now I want to redefine something for you, because the word waiting has been given the wrong meaning in your mind, and I want to correct it. Waiting does not mean you are being punished. Waiting does not mean you have been forgotten. Waiting does not mean that God looked at your situation and decided to pause your blessing until further notice. Waiting, in the language of heaven, means you are being positioned. There is a specific place that is being prepared for you, and a specific version of you that is being prepared for that place. And the two need to arrive at the same time. The delay is not in your blessing. The delay is in the alignment. And alignment, when it finally comes together, is worth every single day of the season that preceded it. I want you to understand the difference between two experiences that feel similar from the inside but are completely different in their meaning. The first experience is being overlooked. Being overlooked means you were present, you were visible, you were considered, and someone chose to pass over you anyway. That is a real experience, and it is painful, and it is valid. But the second experience is being positioned. Being positioned means that the right doors have not opened yet, because you are not standing in front of the right doors yet. Heaven is not ignoring you. Heaven is moving you. And sometimes being moved feels exactly like being overlooked, because from the inside you cannot always see the direction you are being carried. You just feel the motion and certainty and the temporary loss of the landmarks you used to navigate by. But here is what I need you to hold on to. You are not in a season of being overlooked. You are in a season of being positioned. The two people who were digging on you, who were whispering about you, who were doing their best to make sure certain doors stayed closed to you, did not have the authority to define your destination. They only had the ability to delay a door that was never theirs to open in the first place. And heaven has warned them completely. The season of them operating with any kind of power over your narrative is finished. So right now, if you are listening and you feel the weight of this season lifting even slightly, if you feel even a small shift in the air around you, I want you to do one thing. Go to the comment section and type the word ready. Just that word. Not a sentence, not an explanation, just ready. Because that is what you are. You are not almost ready. You are not getting ready. You are ready. And declaring it in this moment is an act of spiritual agreement with what heaven is already doing in your life. And if this message is reaching you at a moment when you needed it more than you can say, please consider sharing it. Not because this channel needs the numbers, but because there is another chosen one in your circle who is sitting in this exact same season and who has not yet found the words for what they are feeling. You sharing this message might be the moment their vocabulary for their own journey finally arrives. Like this video so that heaven keeps sending it to the people who need it. And if you have not yet subscribed, do that now, because there is more coming for you, and you do not want to miss what follows this word. Something shifts when you stop waiting for permission to begin. And I want to speak to that shift right now, because the danger in a long season of waiting is not just the emotional weight of it. The danger is that waiting can gradually begin to feel like your identity. You wake up and you are the person who is still waiting. You go to sleep and you are still the person who has not yet seen the thing they believed for. And over time, that identity, the identity of someone who is perpetually in between, can start to feel more permanent than it was ever meant to be. So today, I want to give you something practical, something you can do, not tomorrow, not after things change, not once you feel more ready. Today, there is a practice I want to walk you through. It does not require a special location. It does not require any equipment. It does not require you to be in a particular emotional state or a particular spiritual condition. It requires only this 7 minutes and the willingness to show up for yourself with honesty. That is all. And before I walk you through the 3 steps of this practice, I want to explain why 7 minutes matters, because it is not an arbitrary number, and I do not want you to treat it as one. Your brain, specifically the part of your brain that governs creativity, intuition, pattern recognition, and what some researchers describe as higher-order thinking, operates on specific frequencies. These are literal electrical frequencies, measurable waves that move through your neural tissue and determine the quality and texture of your thinking at any given moment. When you are in a state of stress, of hypervigilance, of constant waiting and watching for the next difficulty, your brain spends most of its time in the higher frequency states, the ones associated with alertness and reactivity. Those states are necessary for survival, but they are not the states in which clarity arrives. They are not the states in which creative solutions emerge. They are not the states in which the still, small voice can be heard above the noise. The lower frequency states, specifically the theta range, which operates between 4 and 8 cycles per second, are the states associated with deep creativity, with intuitive knowing, with the kind of learning that sticks, and with the spaciousness that allows you to hear what you cannot hear when your brain is running fast. Children spend a significant portion of their waking hours in theta. It is why children learn language at a speed that no adult can replicate. It is why children can believe things fully without the interference of doubt. It is why children dream vividly and wake up still feeling the dream. Somewhere in the process of growing up, of taking on responsibility and worry, and the accumulated weight of disappointment, most people lose consistent access to that state. They visit it briefly in the moments, just before sleep and just after waking, but they rarely sustain it. 7 minutes of intentional, guided practice is enough time for your brain to begin shifting toward that state without pushing past the point of diminishing return. Less than that, and the shift is too shallow to create any lasting effect. More than that, without proper guidance, and many people simply fall asleep or their mind drifts entirely. 7 minutes is the window, and the 3 steps I am about to give you are designed to use that window as effectively as possible. Step 1. Before you do anything else, before you close your eyes, before you settle into stillness, I want you to identify one specific thing that did not happen to you and be genuinely grateful for it. Not a thing you received, a thing you were spared. This is a different kind of gratitude than the kind most people practice, and it matters because it does something specific in the nervous system. When you focus on what you received, gratitude activates appreciation. But when you focus on what did not happen, on the harm that was aimed at you and missed, on the door that closed before it could trap you, on the person who left before they could do more damage, on the plan that fell apart before you could invest more of yourself into it, That kind of gratitude activates something deeper. It activates trust. It shifts your spirit from the position of someone who is barely surviving to the position of someone who is actively protected. So take a moment right now and let one thing come to mind. It might be a relationship that ended and that you grieved, but that ending protected you from something you could not see at the time. It might be an opportunity that closed and that felt like rejection, but that closed door redirected you towards something with greater alignment. It might be something more specific, a conversation that never happened, a decision you almost made but did not, a place you almost went but something stopped you. Let one thing surface, hold it gently, and let the gratitude for that protection settle into your chest before you move to the next step. Do not rush this. The gratitude is not a formality. It is the foundation on which the rest of the practice rests. Step 2. Once that gratitude has settled, I want you to make one specific statement out loud, or, if you are in a place where speaking aloud is not possible, as clearly and deliberately as you can in your own mind. The statement is this: I am not behind. I am on time. Say it again. I am not behind. I am on time. Now let me explain why this statement matters and why it is connected to the concept of sacred time that we will explore more deeply later in this message. There are two kinds of time operating simultaneously in your life. There is the time that the world measures, the calendar, the clock, the cultural checkpoints that tell you where you should be by a certain age or a certain stage. And then there is the time that heaven measures, which does not operate on a calendar and does not recognize cultural checkpoints as authoritative. The world's time says you are late. Heaven's time says you are exactly where you are supposed to be. And the statement you are making in step 2 is not a denial of where you are. It is a realignment of which measure of time you are choosing to trust. This matters neurologically as well as spiritually. When your brain is operating under the belief that you are behind, it activates the stress response. It floods your system with the kind of chemical messaging that narrows your thinking, speeds your pulse, and closes down the creative and intuitive centers of your mind. When you consciously, deliberately interrupt that belief with a stated truth, one that you are choosing to adopt, not because it is emotionally comfortable, but because it is spiritually accurate, you begin to shift the physiological environment inside your own body. You are not pretending, you are choosing. And that choice has measurable effects on the quality of your thinking and the openness of your perception in the minutes that follow. Step 3. After you have completed steps 1 and 2, find a comfortable position, either seated or lying down, and allow yourself 7 minutes of genuine silence. Not the silence of someone waiting for something to happen. Not the silence of someone monitoring themselves to see if they are doing it correctly, but the silence of someone who has made a decision to be still and trust that stillness has value even when nothing dramatic occurs inside of it. If thoughts arise during this silent sentence, and they will, do not fight them. Simply notice them and return, gently and without self-criticism, to the silence. If emotions surface, let them surface. The practice is not about achieving a particular state. It is about creating the conditions in which your brain can shift naturally toward the frequency where clarity lives. 7 minutes. That is all. And I want to be honest with you about what this practice can do and what it cannot do on its own. On its own, in a single sitting, it can give you a window of clarity. It can slow your nervous system enough that you hear things during or after the practice that you would not have heard in your regular state of alertness. It can create a small but real opening in the wall of noise that a difficult season builds around you. That is not nothing. That is actually significant. A single window of clarity in the middle of a long season of confusion can change the decision you make today. And the decision you make today can change the direction of the next several months of your life. But I also want to tell you what sustained, guided practice over time can do. Because the single session is a door, and what is on the other side of that door is worth understanding before you decide whether to walk through it. Over time, with consistent practice, the brain does not just visit the lower frequency states for 7 minutes and then retreat. It begins to build new pathways. It begins to spend more of its ordinary, everyday functioning in the range where intuition is accessible, where creative thinking happens naturally, where the kind of knowing that has nothing to do with logic and everything to do with spirit becomes a reliable tool rather than an occasional visitor. This is what chosen ones historically have described as walking in the spirit, not a mystical hovering above ordinary life, but a state of integrated awareness where your mind, your body, and your spirit are operating in harmony rather than in competition with each other, where you do not have to fight for clarity because clarity has become your default, where you do not have to manufacture trust because trust has become the water you move through rather than the thing you are constantly trying to hold on to. I am going to speak more specifically about the science behind this, about the research and the tools that make this kind of sustained practice accessible in just a few moments. But before I do, I want you to do something with the 3 steps I just gave you. I want you to commit to practicing them today, not next week, not after things improve, today, even if today is hard, especially if today is hard. The practice is not a reward for a good day. It is a tool for navigating a difficult one. Give yourself 7 minutes. Start with gratitude for what did not happen. Speak the truth that you are not behind, that you are on time. And then sit in the silence and let your brain begin the work it was designed to do when you stop flooding it with urgency. You were created with the capacity for this. It is not something you have to build from nothing. It is something you have to return to, and today is the day you begin returning. Now I want to take what you just practiced and show you why it works. Not just spiritually, though the spiritual dimension is real and it matters, but scientifically. Because one of the things that happens to chosen ones in a long season of difficulty is that they begin to doubt themselves at every level. They doubt their faith. They doubt their discernment. They doubt their capacity. And I want to give you something today that addresses that doubt, not just with encouragement, but with evidence. Because you deserve both. You deserve to be encouraged, and you deserve to understand why the encouragement is not just wishful thinking. Here is what the research tells us. Chosen ones carry a specific frequency, not metaphorically, literally. The brain of a person who is operating at their highest capacity, the brain of someone who is solving problems that others cannot solve, seeing connections that others cannot see, producing work that others describe as inspired, or brilliant, or seemingly effortless. That brain is measurably different in its electrical activity from a brain that is operating under chronic stress and survival pressure. Researchers who study this have given that frequency a name. They call it gamma. Gamma brainwaves operate at the higher end of the measurable spectrum, above 40 cycles per second, and they are associated with what neuroscientists describe as peak cognitive performance. Moments of insight, sudden clarity, the experience of things clicking into place in a way that feels almost external, as if the answer arrived from somewhere outside the ordinary boundaries of your own thinking. You have experienced gamma. You may not have had a name for it, but you have had moments where something became clear to you all at once, where a decision that had been confusing for weeks suddenly resolved itself in a single moment of knowing, where a creative solution appeared fully formed when you were not even consciously trying to find it, where you understood something about a person or a situation with a certainty that you could not justify logically, but that turned out to be entirely accurate. Those were gamma moments. And what the research tells us is that those moments are not random gifts that arrive without pattern or cause. They are the product of a specific neurological state that can be cultivated, supported, and sustained. The man who has spent more than 30 years studying exactly this question is a neuroscientist named Dr. James Rivers. Dr. Rivers received his training at MIT, one of the most rigorous scientific institutions in the world, and his research has been affiliated with NASA, an organization that has a very specific interest in understanding how human cognitive performance can be optimized under pressure. Because the people NASA sends into extreme environments need to be able to access their highest cognitive functioning precisely when the conditions around them are most challenging. That intersection, elite performance under pressure, is exactly the territory that Dr. Rivers has spent his career mapping. What Dr. Rivers found, after thousands of days of research involving brain imaging, frequency measurement, and longitudinal study of high performers across multiple fields, is that the single most important factor in determining whether a person can consistently access gamma-level performance is not their IQ. It is not their education. It is not even their level of motivation or effort. It is the health and flexibility of their theta brainwave activity. Theta, the frequency between 4 and 8 cycles per second that I described in the previous section, is not just a relaxation state. It is the gateway frequency. It is the neurological bridge between the ordinary thinking mind and the higher processing capacity that gamma represents. You cannot reliably reach gamma without passing through theta. And most adults, particularly those who have been living under prolonged stress, have lost consistent access to theta. This is why the threat practice I gave you matters. Step 3. The 7 minutes of silence is specifically designed to allow your brain to drop into theta, and theta is the doorway. But what Dr. Rivers discovered is that the brain can be guided into theta far more efficiently and reliably using a specific category of sound technology than it can through unaided meditation alone. The technology is called brainwave entrainment, and the principle behind it is straightforward once you understand how the brain responds to auditory input. Your brain has a natural tendency to synchronize with rhythmic patterns in its environment. This is not a new discovery. It is a well-documented neurological phenomenon. When you hear a rhythm, your brain begins to align its own electrical activity with that rhythm. This is why music affects your mood. This is why certain sounds help you focus, and others make it impossible to think. This is why silence itself has a measurable effect on brain activity. Brainwave entrainment uses this natural tendency deliberately by delivering precisely calculated audio frequencies that guide the brain toward a targeted state. The most effective forms of this technology use what are called binaural beats, which are slightly different frequencies delivered to each ear simultaneously, creating a third frequency in the brain itself that corresponds to the target state. Combined with isochronic tones, which are rhythmic pulses at specific intervals, the result is an audio environment that does not just suggest a brain state, but actively guides the nervous system toward it. Dr. Rivers spent years refining the exact combination of frequencies and timing that produces the most reliable theta induction in the widest range of individuals. And what he found is that 7 minutes is the optimal duration, long enough for the brain to complete the shift from the higher alert frequencies down into the theta range. Short, enough that the practice does not become demanding or create the kind of fatigue that leads people to abandon it. 7 minutes, which is exactly what I asked you to practice in the previous section, and which is exactly the duration of the tool that Dr. Rivers developed from his research. That tool is called the Genius Wave. It is a 7-minute audio track, available as a digital file, that uses the precise frequency combinations Dr. Rivers identified in his research to guide your brain into the theta state that opens the gateway to gamma performance. You do not need to meditate. You do not need any prior experience with this kind of practice. You do not need to be in a particular emotional state or have achieved any particular level of spiritual development. You simply listen. With headphones if possible, those speakers work for many people, and you allow the audio to do the neurological work while you rest inside it. Now I want to tell you about someone who used this tool in circumstances that were not so different from yours. Her name was Patricia, and she came to the Genius Wave after what she described as 3 years of running in place. She had the ability, she had the desire, she had the faith, but every time she moved towards something meaningful, something seemed to pull her back. She described feeling like she was thinking through fog, like the clarity she needed to make good decisions was always just slightly out of reach. She started using the Genius Wave daily, 7 minutes every morning, before she began her day. Within the first 2 weeks, she noticed that the fog was lifting. Not dramatically, not all at once, but gradually, reliably, the quality of her thinking began to change. Within 3 months, she had made 2 decisions that she described as the clearest decisions of her adult life. One of them changed her financial situation in a way she had been trying to achieve for years. The other one ended a relationship that had been quietly draining her and opened space for a connection that she described as the first one in her life that felt genuinely mutual. She did not attribute all of that to 7 minutes of audio. But she said this, "For the first time in years, I could hear myself think. And when I could hear myself think, I could finally hear what I was supposed to do." Now, I know some of you are already doing the math in your head and thinking that $39 is not nothing. And you are right. It is not nothing. Especially if you are in a season where resources feel tight and every decision about where your money goes carries weight. I want to acknowledge that honestly rather than gloss over it. $39 is real money. And I would never ask you to spend real money on something without being honest about what it is and what it is not. It is not a miracle cure. It is not a replacement for the spiritual work you are doing or the practical steps you need to take in your life. What it is a tool, a scientifically grounded, carefully developed tool that gives your brain the support it needs to function at the level that matches the calling on your life. And the question is not whether $39 is significant. The question is, what is it worth to you to finally be able to hear yourself think clearly? The Genius Wave is normally priced at $49. Through the link in the pinned comment below this video, you can access it today for $39. That is a $10 reduction for the people who find this message and recognize what it is. Every purchase comes with a 90-day money-back guarantee, which means you have 3 full months to use it, to sit inside the practice, to see whether your thinking shifts and your clarity improves and your capacity to navigate your season increases. If it does not, you get your money back without complication or question. That is not a sales tactic. That is confidence in what the research produced. One important thing before I move forward. There are imitation versions of this product circulating in places other than the official link. I want to be direct with you about this because you deserve to receive what was actually developed and not a copy of uncertain quality. The only place to access the authentic genius wave is through the single link that is pinned in the comment section below this video. That is the only link I can stand behind. That is the only source I can vouch for. Please do not purchase from any other location. And finally, this offer is not permanent. The reduced price of $39 is available for a limited time and to a limited number of people. This is not a pressure tactic designed to make you act before you are ready. It is simply the reality of how this offer was structured. If this message resonated with you, if the practice in part 3 felt like something your spirit recognized, if the idea of 7 minutes a day producing a measurable shift in your cognitive clarity sounds like something your season requires, then do not wait on this. The link is in the pinned comment. It is there for you right now. Before we move any further, I need to stay here for a moment, right here, in this specific place between what was just said and what comes next. Because there is a tendency in messages like this one to move too quickly from the product, from the tool, from the practical solution, straight into the hope and the promise and the forward momentum. And I understand why that happens. Hope feels better than pain. Forward momentum feels better than sitting still inside a wound. But I want to resist that tendency today, because you did not come here just to be handed solutions. You came here because something in you needed to be seen first. And being seen means someone has to be willing to look at the hard parts without flinching. So I am going to stay here for a moment. And I am going to say plainly what this season has taken from you, not what it is going to give you, not what is coming on the other side, what it has already taken. Because before you can fully receive what is ahead, you need the dignity of having someone acknowledge what was lost, what was genuinely, actually, unfairly lost. And that acknowledgement cannot be rushed. Let us start with the relationships. Think about the connections that did not get built during this season. Think about the version of you that would have existed if the waiting had not been so long and so isolating. There are friendships that could have deepened if you had not been so consumed by the weight of your own unresolved situation. There are romantic connections that might have flourished if you had come to them from a place of settled confidence, rather than the quiet desperation of someone trying to build something real while internally managing a crisis of faith. There are family bonds that might have been easier, lighter, more present, if you had not been spending so much of your emotional energy just staying afloat. The waiting did not just cost you time. It cost you the relational texture that time was supposed to be filled with. And that is a real loss, not a small one. Not one that can be erased by what comes next, only carried forward differently once you understand what it meant. Think about your career, about the professional trajectory that should have been further along by now. Not because you lacked the talent, not because you lacked the discipline, but because a long season of internal uncertainty makes it difficult to project the kind of settled confidence that opens certain doors. Because when you are managing the emotional labor of a difficult season, a portion of your cognitive and creative bandwidth is simply not available for the work that would have moved you forward. There are opportunities that passed during this season that will not come back in exactly the same form. There are professional relationships that did not get cultivated because you were not in the right internal state to cultivate them. There are projects that did not get launched, ideas that did not get executed, contributions that did not get made, not because you were lazy or unfaithful or uncommitted, but because you were fighting a battle that most people around you could not see. And fighting invisible battles consumes real resources. Think about the freedom to dream out loud. There is a specific thing that a long season of waiting does to a person's relationship with their own dreams. In the beginning of the waiting, you speak about your dreams with a kind of open, unguarded enthusiasm. You tell people what you believe for. You share your vision. You invite others into the picture of what you are building toward. And then the season extends, and the dreams do not materialize on the timeline you expected. And you notice that some people you trusted with those dreams, begin to look at you differently. A slight shift in the eyes, a subtle change in tone, the barely perceptible implication that perhaps you have been believing for something that is not really coming. And slowly, almost without noticing it, you stop speaking about your dreams out loud. You stop inviting people into the vision. You begin to carry it privately, protectively, like something fragile that cannot survive too much exposure to the open air. And that privatizing of your dreams, while it may have protected them from further mishandling, also cost you something. It cost you the joy of shared anticipation. It cost you the warmth of community around your hope. It made the dream a little lonelier than it was supposed to be. And then there is the most personal loss of all, the one that is hardest to say out loud. This season has, at various points, cost you faith in yourself, not faith in God, though perhaps that too has been tested, but specifically, your faith in your own discernment, your trust in your own perception, your confidence in your own capacity to navigate your life well. Because when you do everything right and things still do not move, a quiet internal voice begins to suggest that perhaps the problem is you. Perhaps your judgment is flawed. Perhaps your vision is distorted. Perhaps the gifts you believed you carried are not quite what you thought they were. That voice is not the truth. But it is convincing when you have been in a long season and it has done real damage. And I want to acknowledge that damage before I ask you to rebuild on top of it. I am not going to reframe this quickly. I am going to sit with you in it for a little longer, because the sitting is part of the healing. The acknowledgement is part of the restoration. You cannot skip this step and arrive whole on the other side. There is a man in Scripture whose story I want to bring into this space. His name was Joseph. And I am not going to tell you the end of his story right now, because everybody knows the end of Joseph's story, and the end has a way of making the middle seem more manageable in retrospect than it actually was to live through. I want to talk about the middle. I want to talk about the part of Joseph's journey that does not make it onto the motivational posters. Joseph was a young man who carried a genuine gift. The ability to perceive what others could not perceive, to see patterns in the unseen and communicate them clearly. That was real. Heaven confirmed it, and yet, that same gift made him a target. The people closest to him, his own brothers, the ones who should have been his greatest allies, looked at what he carried and decided that instead of celebrating it, they would bury it. They did not just ignore him. They actively worked to remove him from any position where his gift could bear fruit. They dug on him, to use the language of this message. They conspired against him in the place where he should have been safest. And then they sold him. They handed him to strangers in exchange for something so small it is almost insulting to read. And Joseph found himself in a foreign land, in a foreign household, carrying a gift that nobody in his immediate environment had the capacity to recognize or honor. And then, just when things began to stabilize slightly, just when he had found a way to function within his difficult circumstances, someone who should have protected him chose instead to destroy him further, and he went from a difficult situation to a genuinely unjust one. He ended up in a prison for something he did not do. Years passed. Actual years. Not the feeling of years. Actual years inside actual confinement with actual uncertainty about whether any of the things he had been shown in his youth were ever going to materialize in his reality. I am not telling you that story to tie it up neatly. Not yet. I am telling you that story because I want you to know that the pattern of being gifted and targeted, of being positioned and then seemingly buried, of experiencing betrayal from people who should have known better, is not new. It is not unique to you, and it is not evidence that heaven has abandoned the plan. Joseph, sitting in that prison, did not know the end of the story. He only knew the weight of the middle, and the middle was genuinely, legitimately heavy. His relationships had been severed. His career had been derailed before it fully began. His freedom to dream out loud had been taken from him in the most literal possible way. His faith in himself had been tested at depths that most people are never asked to go to. And still, the gift did not leave him. The frequency that heaven placed inside him, the capacity to perceive and to communicate what he perceived, that did not get stripped away by the brothers who betrayed him, or the woman who falsely accused him, or the cupbearer who forgot him. It stayed, because a gift that comes from heaven cannot be taken by people who operate from earth. They can delay the expression of it. They can create detours around it. They can make you doubt whether it is really there, but they cannot remove it. And the same is true for you. What was placed inside you before this season began is still there. The two people who were digging on you did not have access to that. They could speak about your reputation. They could plant doubt in certain rooms. They could try to close doors that were in their reach to close, but they could not reach the thing that heaven deposited in you. That has always been beyond their jurisdiction, and the season in which they had any influence over your narrative has now been closed. Heaven has spoken. The warning has been issued, and it was issued not for your sake, but as a boundary marker, a line drawn in the unseen that says this far and no further. What belongs to this chosen one is protected from this point forward, so grieve what was taken. You are allowed to do that. You are allowed to sit in the honest acknowledgement that the years cost you something real, that the waiting was not painless, that the losses were not small, that the faith you maintained through the difficulty was not free. It cost you, and the cost was real. But here is what I also need you to hear, and I will say it plainly, even though it will take a few more sections to fully unpack it. What was taken in a season that is ending, and what is coming in a season that belongs entirely to a different kind of story. There is a language older than the one you speak every day, a language that was not invented by scholars or theologians, but that emerged from the lived experience of people who had waited longer than seemed survivable, and who needed words precise enough to hold what they were going through. That language did not develop in comfortable places. It developed in deserts, and in prisons, and in foreign lands, and in the long, silent spaces between a promise and its fulfillment. And I want to bring words from that ancient language into this conversation today, because I believe they will do something for you that modern language has not been able to do. They will give you a frame large enough to hold both the pain you just acknowledged and the promise that is moving toward you. And sometimes, having the right frame is the difference between drowning in a moment and understanding what the moment means. The first word I want to give you is a Greek word. The word is kairos, and to understand why it matters, you first need to understand the word it stands in contrast to. That word is chronos. Chronos is clock time, calendar time, the kind of time that is measured in seconds and days and years and decades. Chronos is the time that the world uses to evaluate your progress. It is the time that tells you how old you are, how long you have been waiting, how many years have passed since the promise was spoken, and how many have elapsed without visible fulfillment. Chronos is not a bad thing. It is simply a measurement tool, but it is a measurement tool that was never designed to evaluate the things of heaven. And the problem that most chosen ones experience in a long season of waiting is that they are attempting to use a Chronos ruler to measure a Kairos reality. And when you do that, you will always conclude that you are behind, because Chronos does not account for the dimension in which heaven operates. Kairos is a different kind of time entirely. Kairos is not measured in duration. It is measured in readiness, in alignment, in the convergence of the right person, the right preparation, and the right moment arriving at the same coordinate. Kairos does not ask how long something has taken. Kairos asks whether the conditions are now right for what was always meant to happen to finally happen. And the critical thing to understand about Kairos is that it cannot be manufactured. It cannot be forced. It cannot be rushed by human effort or extended by human resistance. It arrives when it arrives. And when it arrives, it does not feel like a reward for patience. It feels like a door opening from the inside. It feels like something that was always going to be true finally becoming visible. You have been living in Chronos, counting the days, measuring the years, calculating how far behind the timeline you are. And I want to gently but firmly take that ruler out of your hand today, because it does not belong in this conversation. What is happening in your life right now is not a Chronos event. It is a Kairos moment. It is not about how long it took. It is about the fact that the conditions, your preparation, your positioning, the removal of the people who were working against you, the warning that heaven just issued, are now aligned in a way they have not been before. Kairos has arrived, not because you finally did enough, or waited long enough, or believed hard enough, but because the appointed convergence of all the pieces that needed to be in place has now occurred. This is not a reward for your effort. This is a positioning, and positioning operates on Kairos time, not Chronos time. So when your mind wants to go back to the calendar and count the years and feel the weight of the delay, I want you to practice returning to this word, Kairos. Say it quietly if you need to. Let it remind you that the measure you have been using is not the right measure for what is happening. The right measure says that you are not late. You are not early. You are exactly at the convergence point. You are standing at the Kairos coordinate. And that is not a consolation prize for the years that passed. It is the precise location where what heaven ordained becomes what your life contains. The second word I want to give you comes from a different ancient language. It is a Hebrew word, and the word is kava. In most modern translations of ancient texts, this word gets rendered simply as wait. But that translation loses almost everything that the original word contains. Because kava does not mean passive waiting. It does not mean sitting still with your hands folded and your eyes closed, hoping that something eventually changes. The root image embedded in the word kava is the image of braiding a rope. Specifically, the action of taking multiple strands of fiber and twisting them together under tension, each strand wrapping around the others, each one lending its strength to the whole, so that what emerges from the process is something far stronger than any single strand could be on its own. Think about what that image means when applied to your season. Every year of this waiting has not been a year of passivity. Even in the moments that felt like stillness, something was being woven. Your faith, tested and strained and stretched, was becoming a stronger strand than it was before the testing began. Your discernment, sharpened by the experience of being betrayed by people you trusted, was becoming more precise and more reliable than it was before you knew what it felt like to be digging on. Your compassion, deepened by the experience of suffering that most of the people around you could not see, was becoming more genuine and more grounded than the surface-level compassion you carried before you knew what real hardship felt like. Your capacity for stillness, developed in the long silent spaces of this season, was becoming a spiritual muscle that will serve you in ways you cannot yet fully imagine. You were not waiting passively. You were being braided. Every strand of your experience, the joy and the grief, the progress and the setback, the connection and the betrayal, was being wound together under the tension of a season that felt like it was breaking you. And what is emerging from that process is not a broken person. It is a person of unusual strength. A person whose character has been tested at depths that most people are never taken to. A person who is now capable of holding what is coming, precisely because of everything the waiting wove into them. This is why the ancient writers did not use a simple word for wait. They used a word that contained within it the image of active, purposeful, strength-building work, because they understood from their own experience of long seasons that the person who emerges from genuine, sustained, faith-filled waiting is not the same person who entered it. They are a braided rope, not a single thread. And a braided rope can hold weight that a single thread would snap under. You are not delayed, beloved. You are being assembled. The strands that have been wound into you through this season are not evidence of a life that went wrong. They are evidence of a preparation that went deep. And deep preparation is what is required for the weight of what is coming. Not because what is coming is a burden, but because what is coming is significant. Significant things require significant carriers. And you have been made significant not in spite of this season, but through it. Now, I want to bring these two concepts together, kairos and kava, and hold them against the specific reality of what you have been experiencing. The two people who were digging on you were operating in chronos time. They were working within the dimension of human timing, human influence, human social mechanics. They believed that if they worked quickly enough and persistently enough within those mechanics, they could determine your outcome. And for a while, it may have appeared that they were succeeding. From a chronos perspective, from the outside looking at the calendar and the circumstances, it may have looked like their efforts were working. But they did not have access to your kairos coordinate. They did not know what heaven had appointed for this specific moment in your specific story. They did not know that the very season they were trying to use to was the season that was braiding you into someone capable of standing in a place they could never occupy. They were working in chronos. Heaven was working in kairos, and kairos always wins. Not because heaven is simply more powerful in a generic sense, but because kairos operates in a dimension that chronos-based opposition cannot even see, let alone interrupt. The warning that heaven has now issued to those two people is a kairos warning. It is not a human announcement. It is not a social consequence. It is a boundary drawn in the dimension where your appointed time lives. And that boundary says that the season in which anyone has permission to interfere with what was appointed for you is finished. The appointed time is no longer approaching. It is here, and the midnight hour, that specific, terrifying, sacred threshold between the darkest point and the first movement of a new day, is the exact moment you are standing in right now. In the symbolic language of ancient wisdom, midnight is not simply the middle of the night. Midnight is the hinge. It is the precise point at which the direction of things changes. It is the moment that, from the inside, feels like the deepest darkness, because it is the furthest point from the last light and the furthest point from the next light. And it is the moment that, from heaven's perspective, is the threshold of the most significant transition. Nothing about midnight feels like a beginning. Everything about midnight feels like an ending. The exhaustion is at its peak. The isolation is at its most complete. The faith is at its most tested. And then, precisely at that point, heaven begins to move, not after midnight, not when the sun has already started to rise, and the evidence of change is visible to everyone. At midnight, in the dark, before anyone else can see it, heaven moves first in the invisible, in the appointed, in the Kairos dimension where the decree has already been issued, and what remains is simply the unfolding of what was always going to be true. You are at midnight, chosen one. And at midnight, when everyone who was watching assumed it was all over, when the two people who were digging on you thought the darkness was permanent, heaven has already begun to move. What God has ordained, delay cannot cancel. What heaven has appointed, human opposition cannot revoke. The midnight hour is not the end of your story. It is the hinge on which your story turns. And you are standing on it right now, in the dark, not yet seeing the light that is already in motion toward you, but standing on the exact coordinate where the turning happens. The waiting was not wasted. The braiding was not accidental. The appointed time was always this moment, and the midnight is already giving way. Something is moving. I need you to feel that before I say anything else. Not moving in the distant future, not moving in the abstract language of eventually and someday, and when the time is right. Moving now, in the unseen dimension that Kairos occupies, in the space where heaven makes its decrees before the physical world catches up to them. Something has already shifted, and the reason I know this is not because I have access to your specific circumstances. It is because of where you are, standing. Midnight does not last. It is a threshold, not a residence. And the chosen one who arrives at midnight with their faith still intact, however battered, however thread thin, however barely holding together, that chosen one does not stay at midnight. They cross it. And what waits on the other side of that crossing is what I want to speak to you about right now. But before I describe what is coming, I want to do something that most messages skip over. I want to describe the emotions you are feeling right now, in this in-between space, in this midnight threshold, where you can feel that something is shifting, but you cannot yet see what it is shifting into. Because this particular emotional territory is one of the most disorienting places a chosen one can inhabit. And if you do not have language for what you are feeling, you can mistake it for something. It is not. What you are feeling right now is not confusion. Though it may feel like confusion on the surface, it is the sensation of your spirit orienting towards something new before your mind has been given the information it needs to understand what that new thing is. It is the experience of your internal compass swinging toward a new north before the map has been updated to show where north is. It is simultaneously exciting and unsettling, and the unsettled feeling is not a warning sign. It is a calibration. Your spirit is adjusting to a frequency it has not operated at in a long time, possibly ever. And the adjustment has a texture of disorientation to it that is completely normal and completely temporary. You may also be feeling a heightened sensitivity right now. Things that did not used to affect you emotionally are touching you more deeply. A song lands differently than it used to. A stranger's kindness moves you in a way that feels disproportionate to the gesture. A quiet moment carries a weight of meaning that you cannot fully articulate. This heightened sensitivity is not weakness. It is your spirit becoming more porous to what heaven is pouring in. the walls that you built during the hard season, the protective emotional distance, the careful management of hope so that disappointment would not hit too hard. Those walls are beginning to come down, not because you decided to take them down, but because the season that made them necessary is ending. And as they come down, everything feels more intense, more present, more real. That is not instability. That is aliveness returning. Now I want to tell you specifically what is about to change. Not in vague, general terms, but in the 3 areas of your life where the movement is most imminent and most specific. Because chosen ones in a transition season need more than inspiration. They need orientation. They need to know where to look, what to expect, and what the early signs of movement actually feel like, so they do not miss them when they appear. The first area is your sense of purpose. For a long time in this season, the question of what you are supposed to do has felt either painfully unclear or heartbreakingly clear but impossibly out of reach. Either you have known your calling with perfect precision and watched helplessly as the path toward it seemed to close, or you have felt the call without being able to identify its specific shape, which is its own particular kind of frustration. What is about to happen in this area is not a dramatic thunderclap revelation. It is something quieter and more reliable than that. It is a clarification. A single, specific, small step is going to become clear to you. Not the whole staircase, not the full blueprint, just the next step. And I want you to resist the temptation to dismiss that step because it seems too small relative to the size of the vision you have been carrying. The step will be small enough to actually take, and taking it will reveal the step after it. That is how Kairos moves, not in overwhelming floods of information, but in the single, clear, actionable revelation of what to do next. The second area is your relationships. And this is one that I want to address with particular care, because the relational dimension of a transition season can be the most emotionally complex. What you are going to notice first is not the arrival of new people, though new people are coming. What you are going to notice first is a natural, unforced, peaceful completion of certain connections that have been held in an uncomfortable in-between state. Relationships that have felt strained, that have required more energy to maintain than they were returning in nourishment, that have been held together by history or obligation rather than genuine mutual recognition. Those are going to resolve themselves. Not necessarily with drama or confrontation, in many cases with a simple quiet fading, a gradual loosening of a grip that was never meant to be permanent. And rather than grieving those completions, I want you to understand them as heaven creating space. Because the people who are coming into your life in this new season cannot enter rooms that are already full. The departures are not losses, they are preparations. The people who are coming are going to feel different from most of the connections you have made in the past. They are going to feel easier, not in the sense of being shallow or unchallenging, but in the sense of being genuinely mutual. You will not have to perform for them. You will not have to manage their perception of you. You will not have to make yourself smaller, or more palatable, or less than what you are in order to maintain the connection. They will arrive already oriented toward the real version of you, and they will appear in places and through circumstances that you will recognize as being arranged rather than accidental. Pay attention to the connections that feel surprisingly natural in the coming weeks. Those are not coincidences. Those are appointments. The third area where movement is imminent is the area of resources and opportunities. And I want to be very specific about how this shift is going to feel, because it is going to feel different from how you have been used to pursuing things. In the difficult season, Obtaining what you needed required constant, exhausting effort. You pushed, and things resisted. You pursued, and things retreated. You applied, and things declined. You knocked, and things stayed closed. And over time, that pattern, push and resist, pursue and retreat, knock and stay closed, began to feel like the permanent nature of your relationship with opportunity. Like you were constitutionally someone who had to fight harder than everyone else for the same results. That pattern is about to break. What is coming does not require that kind of fighting. What is coming is what I can only describe as things finding you. Opportunities appearing through channels you did not activate. Doors opening through connections you did not cultivate. Resources arriving through avenues you did not anticipate. This is not magic, and it is not luck. It is the natural result of being positioned in kairos rather than striving in chronos. When you are in alignment with your appointed time, you do not have to chase what belongs to you. It moves toward you, not because you are passive, but because the striving that was required in the misaligned season is no longer the appropriate mode of engagement for the aligned one. Now, I want to tell you what not to do in this transitional period, because the shift from one season to another has its own specific vulnerabilities, and knowing what to avoid is as important as knowing what to expect. Do not go back. This sounds obvious, but it is not. When the familiar discomfort of the old season begins to lift and the new season is not yet fully established, there is a powerful pull toward what is known. Even if what is known was painful, the pain of the old season at least had a texture you recognized. The uncertainty of the new season, even when it is positive uncertainty, can feel threatening in a way that makes the familiar pain seem preferable. Do not go back to the relationships that heaven is peacefully completing. Do not go back to the patterns of striving and pushing that belong to the season that is ending. Do not go back to the people who were digging on you with an offer of reconciliation that costs you your forward momentum. The warning has been issued. The chapter is closed. Walking back through a closed chapter does not reopen it. It only delays your entry into the one that is open. Do not minimize what you are sensing. In this threshold period, you are going to have intuitions, impressions, quiet knowings that arrive without logical justification. Your first instinct, trained by a long season of having your hope disappointed, will be to question them, to test them against evidence you do not yet have, to dismiss them as wishful thinking. Resist that instinct. The discernment you have developed through this season is not wishful thinking. It is a refined instrument. Trust it more than you have been trusting it. And do not rush the unfolding. Kairos time has its own pace, and the pace of a Kairos unfolding is often slower in the early stages than the excitement of the transition makes you want it to be. The first signs of movement are going to be small. A single step of purpose clarified. A single new connection that feels different. A single unexpected resource that appears through an unexpected channel. Do not dismiss these small signs because they do not yet look like the full manifestation of everything you have believed for. They are the first threads of the new season becoming visible, and the full picture is already in motion behind them. If something in these words is landing in a place that has been waiting to be named, if you feel the recognition of a spirit that has been in this exact territory and is now hearing it described with accuracy for the first time, I want you to go to the comments section right now and type the single word receive, just that word. Because what you are being asked to do in this moment, more than anything else, is to open your hands. The season of gripping tightly to what little you had so it would not be taken as giving way to a season of open hands. And open hands can receive what closed ones cannot. Type receive in the comments And let that be your declaration that you are ready to stop holding on and start holding out. You have come a long way in this message, and I do not mean that in the casual sense of having simply listened for a while. I mean that something has been happening in you as these words have moved through you. Something has been shifting at a level below the surface of your conscious processing. The acknowledgement of what was lost, the ancient language of Kairos and Kava, the midnight threshold, the three areas of imminent movement. None of that was accidental, and none of it was merely informational. It was intentional. It was designed to do something specific in the interior landscape of a person who has been carrying too much for too long. And if you have stayed with this message through all of that, it means something about who you are. It means you are the kind of person who does not run from depth, who does not flinch when someone names the hard things, who shows up for the full conversation, even when part of that conversation requires sitting inside discomfort without rushing toward the exit. That quality, the willingness to stay present through the full weight of a moment, is not common. And it is one of the things that makes you who you are. So, before we move into the practical and the forward-facing, I want to give you something that I believe you have been waiting to receive without fully knowing that you were waiting for it. I want to give you a name for who you are on the other side of this season. Not a generic name. Not a name that could apply to anyone in any circumstance. A name that is specific to the journey you have been on, to the particular shape of what this season has required of you, and to the particular kind of person that requirement has produced. The name I want to give you is this: you are a cycle breaker. Now let me tell you what that means, because it is more specific and more significant than it might sound on the surface. A cycle breaker is not simply someone who had a hard time and survived it. A cycle breaker is someone whose life, by the specific nature of what they have endured and how they have endured it, interrupts a pattern that would otherwise have continued, not just in their own story, but in the stories of the people who come after them, and the people who are connected to them. The cycle that you have been breaking in this season is the cycle of silence. The cycle that says chosen ones must suffer quietly and alone, must carry their gifts without support, must absorb betrayal without acknowledgement, must wait without anyone naming the weight of the waiting. You have broken that cycle simply by staying, by not walking away, by continuing to show up for a journey that gave you very little visible evidence that it was worth showing up for. And in breaking that cycle in your own life, you have created a template, a living demonstration that it is possible to carry a genuine calling through genuine opposition and arrive on the other side, not broken but braided, not diminished but deepened, not smaller than when you started but larger, more capable, more genuinely yourself than you have ever been. You are a cycle breaker, and that identity does not begin when things get easier. It is already fully true of you right now, in this moment, before a single outward circumstance has changed, because the breaking of the cycle happened in the interior. It happened in the decision you made over and over and over again, in the middle of the hard season, to keep believing when the evidence for believing was thin, to keep praying when the sky felt like concrete, to keep your hands open when everything in you wanted to grip tightly to whatever small certainty remained. That is what a cycle breaker does, and that is what you have been doing. You just did not have a name for it until now. Now, I want to take you somewhere. I want to guide you through a brief visualization, and I want you to stay with me in it rather than observing it from a distance. Allow yourself to actually inhabit it. Because what you are about to see is not a fantasy about the future. It is a description of where you actually are right now. and seeing it clearly will do something in your spirit that description alone cannot accomplish. Picture yourself standing at a threshold, not a door exactly, though it has the quality of a door. It is the space between two rooms, two seasons, two versions of your story. The floor beneath your feet is solid. You are not falling. You are not suspended in uncertainty. You are standing on something real. But behind you, stretching back as far as you can see, is the landscape of the season you have been walking through. And I want you to look back at it for a moment. Not with grief, not with regret, but with the eyes of someone who is now high enough above it to see its full shape. Look at the terrain. See the long stretches of flat ground where nothing seemed to be happening but where. Now that you can see from above, you can trace the path that was being prepared beneath the surface. See the places where the road narrowed and felt impassable, and where you somehow passed through anyway. See the moments that felt like dead ends that were actually turns. See the people who came for a season and who are now behind you, their role in your story complete, their contribution, whether they intended it as contribution or not, woven into the person you became. Look at all of it. Let yourself see the full shape of what you walked through. And now, without looking away from the past but without being held by it, allow your gaze to shift upward, not backward, not forward yet, upward. And as you look upward, notice something. The ceiling you have been bumping against, the invisible upper limit that seemed to cap how far your life could expand, is not there anymore. The space above you is open, not threatening in its openness but inviting, as if it has been cleared specifically to make room for what is about to rise. The removal of that ceiling is not something you accomplished. It is something that was accomplished on your behalf, in the Kairos dimension, in the appointed time, by the same heaven that placed the calling inside you before you were born. And now, still standing in that threshold space, allow yourself to become aware of what is directly in front of you. Not the full expanse of the new season yet, just the immediate next space, the first room of the new chapter. And notice that the door to that room is not locked. It is not even fully closed. It is slightly ajar, and through the gap you can see light, not the harsh fluorescent light of exposure or performance, warm light. The kind that does not demand anything from you, the kind that simply illuminates, the kind that says you are welcome here exactly as you are. You are standing at the threshold, beloved, not approaching it, not still making your way toward it, standing on it, right now, in this moment. The season behind you is real, and it mattered, and it cost you, and it braided you, and it positioned you. And the season in front of you is also real, already in motion, already lit from within by what heaven has been preparing while you were walking through the dark. And you are standing exactly in between, on the hinge, at the Kairos coordinate, at the midnight that is already turning. You do not need to leap. You do not need to rush. You do not need to be more ready than you already are. All you need to do is take one step forward. One. The threshold does not require a dramatic entry. It requires a willing one. And you are willing. You would not be here, in this message, at this depth of engagement, if you were not willing. The willingness is already fully present in you. It has been present through every hard day of this season. It is present now, and it is enough. Before I release you from this visualization, I want to speak something over you. A set of simple, personal blessings that I want you to receive, not as poetic language, but as genuine declarations, spoken over the specific person you have become through this specific journey. May the clarity that has been building in the quiet finally find its full voice in your life. May the relationships that are coming meet you as you actually are and love what they find. May the resources that belong to your season arrive through channels that remind you that you did not have to earn them by suffering more. May the purpose that has been crystallizing in the waiting finally take the shape of something you can hold and move toward and build. May the people who were digging on you find no more ground in your life that is accessible to their effort. And may the God who placed the calling inside you before any of this began be pleased, not just with where you are going, but with who you have been on the way there. You are a cycle breaker, and the cycle, beloved, is broken. You are still standing at that threshold. And I want you to stay in that posture for just a moment longer, not because I want to keep you suspended in the beautiful and the symbolic, but because the threshold is the exact right place from which to make practical decisions. Decisions made from the threshold, from the place of clear seeing where you can look back at what was and forward at what is coming, are different in quality from decisions made in the middle of the hard season when the fog was thick and the weight was heavy and the visibility was poor. You have better sight right now than you have had in a long time. And I want to use that sight to give you something concrete, something you can do today, not eventually, not once things stabilize, today. Because one of the things that chosen ones struggle with in the transition between seasons is the gap between the spiritual awareness of change and the practical expression of it. You can feel that something is shifting. You can perceive that the old season is ending and the new one is beginning. You can sense the movement in the unseen. And yet you wake up tomorrow morning and the same apartment is there, and the same obligations are there, the same bank balance is there, and the same relationships are there, and the question becomes, what do I actually do with this awareness? How does a Kairos moment translate into a Tuesday morning? That is the question I want to answer right now, practically, specifically, in a way that you can actually implement. But before I give you the practical steps, I want to describe the 3 areas of your life where transformation is not just possible, but imminent. Because the practical steps I am going to give you are not generic life advice. They are specific to the 3 areas where heaven has already initiated movement, and where your conscious, intentional cooperation with that movement will accelerate what is already happening. The first area is your relationships. And I want to be very precise about what is happening here, because the relational shift of a transition season has a specific sequence, and understanding that sequence will help you navigate it with grace rather than confusion. What you are going to experience first is not the arrival of the new. It is the natural, peaceful completion of the old. And I want to tell you specifically what that completion is going to look like, because if you are not prepared for it, you can mistake it for loss when it is actually liberation. Some of the people who have been in your life, people who were there during the hard season, are going to begin to feel increasingly misaligned with where you are going. Not because they are bad people, not because your time with them was meaningless, but because they were companions for a specific chapter of your story, and that chapter is closing. You will notice it first as a subtle shift in the energy of your interactions. Conversations that used to flow will begin to require effort. Time spent together that used to feel restorative will begin to feel draining. And you will feel a quiet but persistent pull to spend your time and energy differently. Do not fight that pull. Do not guilt yourself for feeling it. It is not disloyalty. It is discernment. Heaven is creating space in your relational landscape for the people who belong to the next chapter. And space can only be created by the natural completion of what does not belong there. The people who are coming into your life in this new season are going to share something specific with you. They are going to be oriented toward the same frequency. They are going to be people who are also in the process of stepping into something larger than where they have been. They are going to be people who carry a calling of their own and who recognize yours without requiring you to perform it for them. They are going to be people whose presence in your life feels like confirmation rather than competition. And they are going to arrive through circumstances that feel arranged. A conversation that happens because of a small, seemingly random decision you made. A connection that forms through a channel you did not expect. A friendship that begins in a moment that feels ordinary, but that you will look back on and recognize as having been a divine appointment. Here is what I want you to do practically in this area. The single most important action you can take right now in the relational dimension of your life. Stop auditing your current relationships and start simply being present in them with an open hand. What I mean by that is this. Stop trying to determine which relationships are going to survive the transition and which are not. You do not have to make that determination. The transition will make it naturally. Your job is not to manage the completions. Your job is to stay genuinely present, genuinely kind, genuinely yourself, and trust that the right people will be drawn toward the authentic version of you that is emerging, and that the misaligned connections will complete themselves peacefully without requiring you to force an ending. Open hands in your relationships. Hold loosely. Be present, let heaven do the sorting. The second area of imminent transformation is your sense of purpose. And I said earlier that a single small step is going to become clear, and I want to build on that now with something more specific. The clarity about purpose that is coming to you in this season is not going to arrive as a complete revelation of your entire assignment. It is going to arrive as a series of small, increasingly clear invitations, each one building on the previous one, each one revealing enough of the path to take. The next step, but not so much that you can skip the process of actually walking it. The question that has been tormenting you, the question of what am I supposed to do with my life? What is my purpose? What is the specific expression of this calling that I carry? That question is about to begin resolving itself. Not all at once, but in the way that a path through a forest becomes clear. You cannot see the full path from where you are standing, but you can see enough of it to take the next step. And when you take that step, you will see the step after it, and so on, until the path has revealed itself fully by the simple act of walking it. Here is the practical action for this area. In the next 24 hours, I want you to identify one single thing that you have been postponing because you were waiting for more clarity, more resources, more confidence, more confirmation before you began it. One thing. It does not need to be the whole vision. It needs to be the smallest possible expression of the direction you sense you are being called toward. And I want you to do one concrete action related to that thing today. Write the first paragraph. Make the first phone call. Register for the first class. Have the first conversation. Take one action, however small, that moves in the direction of the thing you have been postponing, because Kairos time, appointed time, does not activate by waiting for conditions to be perfect. It activates by the first step of faithful movement toward what you sense is true. Take the step. The path will appear beneath your feet as you walk. The third area of imminent transformation is the area of resources and opportunities. And this is the area where I want to address something very specific that chosen ones in a difficult season often carry as a hidden belief. The belief that they are constitutionally someone who has to work harder than everyone else for the same results. That the doors that open easily for other people require extraordinary effort from them. That the resources that flow naturally to others are things they have to fight for, apply for, beg for, prove themselves worthy of over and over again. That belief was understandable in the season you have been in. The evidence seemed to support it. But it was never the truth about who you are. It was the truth about the season you were in. And the season is changing. What is about to happen in the area of resources and opportunities is a shift from striving to receiving, from pushing to being met, from chasing to being found. And this shift is going to require you to do something that may feel deeply counterintuitive, given everything the hard season taught you about how things work. It is going to require you to stop explaining yourself, to stop over-justifying your needs and your requests and your worth, to stop preemptively apologizing for taking up space or asking for what you need or expecting to be compensated fairly for what you offer. The striving posture, the posture of someone who perpetually has to prove that they deserve what they are asking for, is a posture that belongs to the old season. And you are going to have to consciously, deliberately choose a different posture in the new one. The new posture is the posture of someone who knows what they carry and who presents it without apology, not with arrogance, not with entitlement, but with the quiet, settled confidence of someone who understands that what they have to offer is genuinely valuable, and that the right people and opportunities will recognize that value without requiring an elaborate justification of it. That posture is going to feel uncomfortable at first because it is new, but practice it anyway, because the opportunities that are coming toward you in this new season are going to respond to that posture in a way that the striving posture never could have attracted. Here is the practical action for this area. Identify one situation in your current life where you have been underselling yourself. One relationship, one professional context, one area where you have been presenting a diminished version of what you actually offer because you were afraid that the full version would be too much or would not be received well. And in that one context, in the next 7 days, choose to show up as the full version, not the performed, inflated version, the genuine, complete, unedited version of what you actually carry. See what happens. I believe you are going to be surprised by how differently things respond to the real you than they responded to the managed, careful, smaller version you have been presenting. Now let me give you 3 immediate actions, one for each area, that you can take today before this message has fully faded from your awareness. For relationships, open your hands. Choose one connection today where you have been gripping tightly out of fear of loss, and make a conscious decision to hold it loosely, not to abandon it, but to release the grip of anxiety around it. For purpose, take one small action toward the thing you have been postponing. 1. Today, before you sleep. 4. Resources and opportunities. Identify one area where you have been underselling yourself and make a mental commitment, a genuine, spoken aloud if possible commitment, to show up as the full version in that area within the next 7 days. 3 actions, 3 areas. All of them available to you today, right now, in the exact circumstances you are currently in, without waiting for anything to change first. Because the change does not precede the action. The action is what invites the change to arrive. And you are a chosen one who has been prepared, braided, assembled, and positioned for exactly this moment. The preparation is complete. The Kairos coordinate is active, and the step forward is yours to take. I want to start here by saying something that I mean with complete sincerity and without any performance attached to it. Thank you for staying, not in the polite, transactional way that people say thank you at the end of a long interaction, but in the way that you thank someone who showed up when they did not have to, because that is what you did. You showed up for this message when you did not have to, You stayed through the parts that were uncomfortable. You stayed through the naming of what was lost. You stayed through the ancient language and the visualization and the practical steps and all of the territory in between. And the part of you that stayed, the part that was willing to sit inside the full weight of this conversation rather than clicking away when it got too close to the real things. That part of you is the part that heaven has been speaking to this entire time. That part of you is the part that the waiting was preparing. And I want to honor it before I say anything else. There is something specific that I want to acknowledge about you that goes beyond what most messages acknowledge. Most messages in this space will tell you that you are chosen, that you are gifted, that you are called, that your breakthrough is coming. And all of those things are true. But what I want to acknowledge is something more interior than any of those declarations. I want to acknowledge the specific courage it took to keep showing up for a journey that was giving you very little visible return on your investment of faith. The courage to keep praying when the prayers felt like they were landing on a ceiling. The courage to keep believing when the evidence for belief was thin and the evidence against it was loud. The courage to keep your integrity intact in a season where it would have been understandable, even forgivable, to let it slip. The courage to stay soft when hardness would have been the easier and more self-protective choice. That courage is not a small thing. It is actually one of the rarest things, and it is the thing that qualifies you for what is coming more than any gift or talent or calling ever could. I want you to know something else. You are not alone in this moment. I know that the long season may have trained you to feel alone. When you carry something that the people around you cannot fully see, when your journey takes you through territory that your closest relationships have not mapped, when the weight you are managing is invisible to most of the people who share your daily life, the loneliness of that experience can begin to feel like a permanent condition rather than a temporary one. But right now, in this specific moment, all across the world, other chosen ones are walking into this exact same message. Someone in a different time zone entirely is hearing these words for the first time and feeling the same recognition you felt. Someone whose language is different from yours, and whose circumstances are different from yours, and whose specific story is different from yours is sitting inside the same interior territory that you have been navigating. You are part of a community that does not always gather in visible, physical spaces, but that is nonetheless real and connected and moving together towards something larger than any individual story. You are not alone. You have never been alone, and the season that made it feel that way is ending. I want to do one final thing with you before this message closes. I want to invite you to put something down, not metaphorically, not as a spiritual exercise that you observe from a distance, but as a genuine embodied act of release that you do right now, in this moment. Before the next thing in your day begins, imagine that everything you have been carrying in this season, every unanswered prayer, every disappointment that did not fully resolve, every relationship that cost more than it gave, every dream that felt like it was dying slowly, every moment of doubt about your own worth and your own calling and your own discernment. Imagine that all of it has a physical weight. And imagine that weight sitting somewhere in your body, maybe in your chest, maybe in your shoulders, maybe in the space between your shoulder blades where tension accumulates when you have been holding something for too long without rest. Feel the specific location of that weight in your body right now. Do not try to analyze it or fix it. Just feel where it is. And now imagine yourself standing back at that threshold. The one I described earlier. The space between the season you are leaving and the season you are entering. And imagine that at the threshold, right at the very edge of the old season, there is a place to set things down. Not to abandon them carelessly, but to lay them down with intention, the way you would lay down a heavy pack after a long day of walking, with relief, with gratitude for having carried it as far as it needed to go, with the recognition that what it contained served its purpose, and that you do not need to carry the container into the new season just because the contents were important. So right now, in whatever physical posture you are in, take one slow, deliberate breath, and as you exhale, make a conscious decision to lay down what you have been carrying. Not permanently suppress it, not pretend it did not exist, but lay it down at the threshold and take one step forward without it, just one step, into the new season, into the Kairos moment, into the space that has been prepared for the version of you that the waiting built. You do not have to carry the weight of the old season into the new one. It served its purpose. It braided you, it assembled you, it positioned you, and now you can set it down and you can walk forward lighter than you have walked in a very long time. Now I want to speak to something practical before I close. If this message found you today, if these words met you in a place that needed to be met, I want to ask you to do something generous. Not for me, for the chosen one who does not know yet that they are a chosen one. For the person in your circle who is sitting in the middle of their midnight hour without anyone to name it for them, without any language for what they are feeling, without the ancient words that could reframe their waiting into positioning and their delay into divine assembly. Share this message with them, not because this channel needs the numbers, though the numbers do. Allow this message to reach further, but because you know what it felt like before someone named it for you. And you have the power right now to be the person who names it for someone else. If this message moved something in you, like it. That small action tells the platform that this kind of content matters, that depth matters, that the chosen ones who are searching deserve to find something that meets them with honesty rather than performance. And if you have not yet subscribed, do that now, because this message is one part of a longer conversation, and what follows it is built on everything that was laid down here. You do not want to arrive at the next part of the conversation without having been in this one. And if you are someone who has been blessed by this channel over time, someone who has found genuine value and genuine shift in these messages, please consider supporting it through a donation. The link is available and the process is simple. And I want to be honest with you about what a donation does. It does not fund a lifestyle, it funds reach. It ensures that the next chosen one who searches for something real at 2 in the morning finds something that is actually worth finding. Not for me, for them, for the person who is where you were before this message found you. If you can give something, give it. And if you cannot, your presence here and your willingness to share is more than enough. One more thing before I let you go. If the genius wave met you somewhere in the middle of this message, if the science of the theta frequency and a gamma state resonated with something you already sensed was true about how your brain and your spirit are meant to operate together. If the idea of 7 minutes a day giving your mind the neurological support it needs to function at the level that matches your calling felt like something your season requires, then know that it is waiting for you. The link is in the pinned comment below. It is there without pressure and without urgency of the manufactured kind. But if your spirit said yes somewhere in this conversation, do not let the momentum of that yes dissipate. Honor it, follow it. The pinned comment is there, the tool is there. And the version of you that operates with that kind of daily neurological support is closer than you think. You showed up for the full conversation today. You sat with the grief and the naming and the ancient language and the practical steps and the visualization and the blessing. You let this message do what it was designed to do. And that tells me something about you that I want to say one final time before we part. You are not someone who is waiting to be ready. You are someone who has been ready and who has simply been waiting for the world around you to catch up to what heaven already decided about your life. That catching up is happening right now, in the unseen, in the Kairos dimension where your appointed time has already been declared, and where the warning to those who opposed you has already been issued. The season of being dug on is finished. The season of being seen, positioned, and released into what you were always meant to be is beginning, and you are walking into it, step by step, breath by breath, lighter than you were when this message found you, and more ready than you have ever been in your life. Walk forward, chosen one. The threshold is behind you now. May you carry with you, from this moment forward, the quiet, unshakable knowing that you were seen here today, not performed for, not marketed to, seen. The weight you walked in with does not have to walk out with you. Leave it at the threshold and go. Go into the day that is waiting for you on the other side of this message. Go into the relationships that are coming. Go into the purpose that is clarifying. Go into the resources that are moving toward you. Go with the ancient words in your spirit, Kairos, Kava, appointed time, midnight turning. Go with the name heaven gave you before you were born, and the name this season revealed, cycle breaker. Go knowing that two people were warned, and go knowing that what was placed inside you before any of them existed is still there, still whole, still lit from within, and still entirely yours. You are blessed, you are chosen, and you are already fully and completely on your way.